Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Ellis.
I'm Madison.
And today we're going to be talking about how to handle hopeless situations. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right. What was your best school project you ever made? And I think we could open this up like art project, science fair experiment, like best one.
Okay,
You
I
got
have
one.
one. So
Okay.
I was homeschooled all the way through. I think I mentioned that before. I forget what grade I was in, but my mom had me do an oral presentation on a book report for The River by Gary Paulson.
Okay.
I think that's the right author. It's like this. It's basically like My Side of the Mountain, but more modern. Of like this kid who is like, I can't remember if he goes into the wilderness on purpose or if he gets stranded in the wilderness, but he's basically like stuck on a raft and I don't know. He's in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, I was supposed to have props. And I love props and little trinkets. So I made this little box that I decorated like it was, a river. And I filled it with things that I could, pull out and, say story points for. And it was really fun.
Nice.
Can I ask, who do you give the presentation to?
My parents.
Okay.
And my sister.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you went somewhere and had to do it or.
Some people do go to
Okay.
co-ops and they're homeschooled, but we, just each other.
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
I didn't have that many great school projects, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to talk about one that I know Michael has heard about before because we did this on a previous episode. So I did a picture. I stopped taking art class in 5th grade, right? As soon as it was done being required, I was like, I'm out. Peace. So in 5th grade, I did a painting of a dragon and a knight. And I thought it was, you know what I'm talking about? I thought it was really cool.
Yes.
And it had a little castle in the background. And anyways, the professor, I wasn't in college. I was in elementary school. The teacher came over and was like, yo, this texture in the sky is amazing. How did you do this? What she didn't know is that I had sneezed directly onto it 10 seconds before she walked over and it made this cool texture effect. So, yeah.
I think we had AI generate what that might have looked like.
We did.
Yes.
Because I couldn't find the original. Yep. Yeah, we did.
We'll need to put that back right
Yes.
here. That was fun.
That's, something.
That was something. So mine, I thought this was super cool at the time. So I did a science fair experiment where you take a hard-boiled egg and you peel the shell off of it and you put it on the mouth of a bottle and you create a vacuum.
Oh.
And you
Cool.
suck it down into it. So you just take a little piece of paper, light it on fire, drop it into the bottle, then set the egg on top, and then it'll eventually suck it down into the thing. I won a prize, a ribbon, in
Okay.
the 2nd grade or so, somewhere in there, for this this science project.
I never won a prize, but I did do some fun things just on my own involving fire that
Well, let's hear
were
one.
educational experiences. I played with fire actively. I think I was in 4th or 5th grade. I wasn't alone. My sister was with me.
I played with fire actively.
Yeah. As every child does as soon as they get the opportunity to. We used bundles of toothpicks to melt down candles trying to create one big candle, but there were a lot of spare candles that we were it was I got in a lot of trouble, so don't play with fire.
Well, I mean,
But it was fun. I learned so much.
Mine was channeled in the Cub Scouts, how to start fires.
You had
so
supervised access to the fire.
I wasn't just off willy-nilly with fire.
Oh,
like
I
what I'm
was.
imagining this to be now.
Oh yeah, our mom was not home. We were alone playing with fire.
That is too good. All right, so just to kind of get things going, shift gears a little bit. Where do you feel God's presence most at the moment? Like, in what spiritual disciplines, what areas of your life? Like, however you want to answer that. Mm-hmm. Like, where are you feeling God's presence and connecting with Him the most?
Silence.
Mm.
Silence and stillness. I think it might just be because I've been praying more often lately that just it's a new switch to then say, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to enjoy your company and focus on you and see if you're going to say anything to me. But if not, we'll just be here and be friends and hang out. And it's not current. It's like I'm hoping to get there soon, back outside in like really nice days, because I love watching like the trees move in the breeze and like hearing birds. But it's just been, there's a little bit of break in the weather now, but it's been a really cold few weeks. So.
I mean, it went from like the high of 15 to 18 to 20 to it was 70 degrees. Like, it's bananas.
Yeah, so I'm going to hopefully go get to enjoy some sunshine today.
Nice. For me, it's when I'm writing. Yeah, right now, this season anyway, that's what it is.
That's cool.
I used to really be in the mindset of like, I'm only gonna write for work, essentially, or for like one specific thing at work. Here recently, I've like expanded it to different ways and different styles of writing, but also just for me to process thoughts and things like that. And so here recently, I feel like in just jotting down thoughts or what I'm feeling, God's really showing me things through that, and I'm feeling His presence through that. So that's been pretty cool.
For me, it's been really getting back to the habit of, I mentioned this whenever we did our emotional gauges, I think, or what we're resolved to do somewhere here recently. Like I mentioned how I had started like journaling takeaways and what I feel like God is speaking to me like through my Bible reading. And I've really been feeling and feeling His presence and also hearing from Him there. Like anytime you get that conviction or that kind of feel whenever you're spending time in Scripture or just processing what you're taking away from it. Like I've really been connecting with Him there here in this season.
Yeah,
that's cool.
All right, so I love the way this is phrased. What is your go-to move when you feel like you're in a hopeless situation?
Talk to somebody who knows more than I do.
Yeah.
When I do that, then they're able to listen and usually help me process something that I couldn't have processed on my own, and then give me like help me decide on like an action, like a first step kind of a thing. So
That's definitely true for me too. Like finding somebody that's dispassionate and emotionally removed from whatever the situation is. Because sometimes for me, like I can get so caught up in my feels where I don't always think clearly. Like whenever I get really amped up on something, there sometimes seems to be, now this is just for me and I don't know any other way to describe it, but like there seems to be a disconnect between what I know and what I feel. And so finding somebody that's removed, that can be like, okay, like I get you're in this situation, you're in this spot, you're in this pickle, but what can we do? Like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I can tell that you're feeling, like it just help me process it in a way that's helpful to where I can see a path through it.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a move, and it's just sitting in the suck, if I'm being honest. But I think something that's been effective for me is just voicing the feelings out loud, whether it's just to myself or to God or to another person. Just the act of processing the feelings enough to verbalize them and speak them out loud has been really helpful. So,
well, no, like mine comes after a wallow period. Like,
yes,
like that's always step one.
Yeah,
and then there's usually some sort of God I feel. Or whatever in it, but finding somebody that I can talk to, like that's always been key to helping me process those. But I love that go-to move. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at for the purposes of this episode on how to deal with a hopeless situation, we're going to look at the book of Ruth. So Ellis, take us away.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do first is just a short summary of each chapter. Ruth is only 4 chapters, and so we can go through it pretty quick. But again, super short. I mentioned in the last episode, Cliff Notes apparently aren't a thing anymore. So for y'all who know who Cliff Notes is, this is going to be the Cliff Notes version.
Yes.
Okay, so we're introduced to 2 women named Naomi and Ruth. Ruth, this is all in chapter 1. Ruth loses her husband. Naomi loses her husband and her kids. And so Naomi tells Ruth, like the 2 of them are kind of in this together now. Naomi tells Ruth, "Hey, you really shouldn't stick around with me. You should go and do your own thing." But Ruth insists that she's going to stay with her. So my little subtitle that I put for chapter 1 is "Everyone Dies." It's essentially what happens in chapter 1.
Like
so,
and by everyone but them. And
yes.
just to kind of put, so Naomi is an Israelite woman, and her husband, there was a famine somewhere in Israel. They moved to Moab with their kids, and all of their sons, like all of Naomi and her husband's sons, married Moabite women's, which was a faux pas back then, kind of frowned upon. But all of them did, and so then all of their husband dies. All of the sons' widows basically say, "Yeah, we're gonna dip." And Ruth says, "Nah, I'm with you to the end." And then they return back.
Yeah. So after they get home, like, it still sucks. I think it was in the last chapter that Naomi like is like, "Call me Mara," because Mara means bitterness. Like, she is embodying grief, which she's a widow. Can we blame her? She's literally like a widow who lost her entire family except for her one daughter-in-law who's still with her. They're going through
anytime we come, Madison's describing like a disgruntled woman, like there's always this little situation.
I think that's just
like,
women in
like
general.
now I just imagine all of them just call me Mara.
Call me Mara. Yeah.
Because God's taken everything and I have nothing, so call me bitter because that's my new name.
I mean, pop off. Like, she was lamenting. Good
she really
for
owned
her.
that.
Yeah, she did.
So we have this kickoff to the story, and now once chapter 2 starts, we kind of start, creeping back out of the hopeless into what's next. And the first step is romance. Just kidding. It's not romance right away, but we get to meet a character whose name is Boaz, and Ruth is going to glean from Boaz's fields. I have had a hard time with this word several times on this podcast, but I wrote it down. It's glean. So it's like a practice that they used to do in the Bible times, where poor people could go pick up the pieces of the crops that were being harvested by the farmers. And it was like a way that they could kind of like support themselves, scavenge for resources, even if they didn't have property to grow food on.
It's like a social safety net type situation.
And it was expected of people to be okay with people in need gleaning from their fields. However, it wasn't always like the safest thing to do.
And there's an example of that in the New Testament of Jesus and the disciples doing it.
Yeah.
So Boaz is like, "Yo, who's that over there in that field? Who's that baddie?" Actually, his immediate instinct is just to be a really kind person. So they have this. Sorry.
I love the Madison version of the Bible.
Yes.
Who's that baddie?
I mean,
it's what he did.
yeah, he was making the moves. He approaches her, he interacts with her, and he's basically saying, I'm trying to find the right part to come in here. So it's chapter 2, verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here." You think he wasn't like, "Who's this baddie?" He's saying, "Stay here.
Yes.
Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I told the men not to lay a hand on you."
He called dibs.
I'm sorry. If somebody ever said that to me, like, pitter patter. Where was I? I've told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you're thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. At this, she bowed her face down to the ground. She asked him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? That's like a huge part of this, is that Boaz would have been well within his rights to just ignore her, be mean to her because she was not an Israelite, but he is not only accepting her and welcoming her in, but he's taking care of her and he's sharing his blessings with her. So Boaz replied, I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law, Naomi, since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And so as the story kind of continues in chapter 2, Ruth goes home to Naomi, and they kind of talk about, like, oh my God, he's cute. Oh, I think he's cute too. And they find out that Boaz is actually one of Naomi's guardian redeemers, which is the phrase that the Bible uses, guardian redeemers. But it's basically, I think the best way to summarize it is it's an extended family member of Naomi that has the option to step in and marry any descendants from this portion of the family over here, and not only get to keep all of their land and property, but they're expected to then take care of that person because this woman was widowed. So in Naomi's circle, that would be Ruth.
Yes.
So there's the opportunity for Boaz to show up for them in a huge way, and that takes us to chapter 3.
So this is Ruth at the threshing floor. This is where, like, the grain and stuff was all crushed and separated, the wheat from the chaff and all these things. It was thrown up in the air. The chaff would float away, the grain would fall, then they would mash it on this big mill thing. And that was something that Samson got punished to do, I think, whenever. Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
In this chapter, Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, they devise a plan. One could say hatch a scheme, depending upon...
Like a wholesome one, though.
Yeah. It's a weird one. So here we go. So devise a plan for Ruth to approach Boaz at the threshing floor. Like, hey, we're going to get some victuals, get a little picnic situation. And then Ruth follows Naomi's instructions, and eventually Boaz goes to sleep, and she uncovered his feet, symbolizing her request for him to redeem her as a kinsman redeemer, the guardian redeemer.
Yeah.
Because he's in line. Like, there's a couple other people that have first dibs, so to speak, but he's in the line of succession there.
And he was asleep, right? When she uncovered
he was asleep, and she uncovered his feet and then slept at them.
Oh. Romance.
It's... Yes.
I like to over-romanticize this story. I'm sorry. I think it's cute.
So Boaz acknowledges Ruth's virtue. He sees how hard she's working and how out of the way and above and beyond she's been going to stick with Naomi and help her. Because, I mean, Naomi's kind of been home, it kind of reads like, and Ruth's been going out there working to provide for them, and expresses his willingness to fulfill the role of the Redeemer. But since there's another relative who has a closer claim, Boaz promises to resolve the matter the next day.
A man of action.
Yes.
I'd love to see it.
So there's some takeaways that you can get there. I mean, obviously, that's a pretty bold move for Ruth to go in there and uncover his feet and sleep at him and all the things. Like, that's... I don't know how common that was then, but...
I feel like...
It's a bold step.
It would be weird to do that now. Like, really weird. It had to have been even weirder back then.
Yeah.
Because they had, like, I don't know.
But
I just don't.
Yeah,
anyways, that's awkward.
This one's a difficult story for us to relate to culturally, I think.
Yes.
There are some things like that. Like, they had a plan. They was like, listen, we have an opportunity to make our situation better here.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to do that. So Naomi had her despair moment, like, call me bitter, all the things. But now they see an opportunity and they're moving to make a good solution and a good future for themselves.
I feel like, too, and in relation to that is they're being honest with each other about where they're at.
Yes.
And they're having this communication. So they're both going through it.
Yes.
But because they're not closing each other out of their lives and their goal is to support each other, they're able to help each other pick back up and have food and know what to do and who to ask for help. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And so Now this moves us into chapter 4, where Boaz redeems Ruth. This to me is just comical and just weird, but
It is. It's strange.
yes. But, so let's get through this, then we can pick it apart and make fun of it. Okay, so
Fine.
so Boaz, just picturing this scene. All right, so we're at the town gate. Like that's where everything happens. That's where all the business of the day. Kind of think of it like out on the steps of the courthouse here in Powhatan whenever things are going down. So Boaz gathers all the elders and presents the case for him redeeming Ruth to the closer relative. So when the relative declines, like he's like, here, you have the option to do this first. You have first dibs here. Here's all the things that you're going to have to take. So you need to consider this. You need to consider this. You need to consider this. He's kind of making it to where, like, you don't really want this. I want this. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It kind of has that vibe. So when that relative declines, Boaz then says, I'm in. Like, I got it. And so then he redeems Ruth. He marries her. Like, he kind of downplays it to the other person and then swoops in. You know? Like, that's... like, that's...
Man's a haggler.
But that's, like... And then they have a baby, and then Naomi's happy. She's no longer bitter because she's got a little grandbaby. And everything is kind of resolved. It's got a nice little happy bow. And then the chapter, and this is where, like, you know, whenever you watch a movie, and then there's like a thing at the end, like a title screen comes up, but it, like, tells you, like, and then so and so and so and so, and then this happens, like, and it sets up like an important historical event or something. Like, that's what this does. So the chapter then concludes. It starts in 4. Let's see, chapter 4, verse 17. And the women of the neighborhood, like, has the name, like, Naomi's got the baby. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi, because that was, like, how, just the culture of the time, like, this is Naomi's son or whatever. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Wow.
And then at the end it says, now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Now we're up to Boaz, who's the man we've been reading about. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. So, like, this was, like, the big twist at the end was, this is how David, like, this is where David came from.
And then continues to Jesus.
And then you can trace the line of David all the way to Jesus.
Which is so cool. Like, it's just cool that, like, we have this little story that's, like, a nice, like, 4 chapters. We get to see all of it. But then we get this, like, little, here's how it plays into the overarching story of the Bible and what Jesus did for us, and the fact that there's redemption written into this side story that kind of can compare to the way that we are redeemed. It's beautiful.
And that's some of the things that I wrote, like, so some takeaways from here, like God's sovereignty in lineage in the events of history. You know, this genealogy here highlights God's sovereignty in orchestrating events to fulfill his larger plan. Showing that even in ordinary lives, God works through us with extraordinary purposes. Like, that's just something that's really cool to think about. Like, you have no idea where your descendants are going to end up or where they're going to go, and it's just a really cool thing to think about. So,
That's cool.
Now, to get us set up for the back half of this conversation,
yes,
check out this clip.
When we wonder where God is, when we don't feel his presence, when we read the Bible but the words just seem empty, it is especially in these seasons that we need to cry out, not for God to take our lives, but for God to renew our lives. Your recovery plan may or may not include medicine, but it must include God. And as you cry out for him again and again, claiming what you know to be true about him, even if you don't feel it, you will find him again. Don't convince yourself that you've got to get better first, that you got to be happy first. It's okay. We're here. God is here.
I think one of the things I want to come back to Pastor Brian in a sec. I think one of the things that really jumps out to me in the Ruth and Naomi story is that all of the widows there were in a hopeless situation. Like, if you were a widow back then, like, that was a sucky place to be, especially if you didn't really have any other extended family or anybody there. So Naomi recognized, like, listen, I'm in Moab. This sucks. And so she knew she had to go back, like, because her situation there, it wasn't going to be much better back home, but it was going to be bad there.
Yeah.
And Ruth was like, hey, like, my situation, this isn't ideal. This sucks for me too. Let's just do this together. Like, so she recognized that there. And I think, you know, Naomi's like, gave him like 3 outs, like 3 chances, like dip, like the other ones took it. And Naomi's like, listen, or Ruth's like, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. That's chapter 1, verse 16. Like, just finding your person or your people is huge whenever you are going through something. And so that just to me is like right where I go whenever I start looking at the type of situation and how hopeless it was.
Yeah. And she was like still comfortable in that space, or not comfortable, but in that space where she was sticking by the person that she knew would be the support to her. She was still willing to be like pulled out of her comfort zone, even though like at that point she's in grief, like her normal is outside of her comfort zone, but she steps even further outside of it. So I think being willing to like figure out what are some ways that I could step out. Okay, am I in a hopeless situation because I need to go talk to a professional? Am I in a hopeless situation because I need to ask somebody to help me get my head above water with the chores around my house? Stuff like that, of like being willing to just step outside of it, I think really served her well. Yeah.
I agree. I don't have much to add, honestly. I think just there's a lot in the story, just as a general rule of thumb of how can we start to approach caring for somebody in our lives or in our circle who is going through something really tough, because there's not a textbook answer to that question.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of situations that they might be in, and different situations require different things, and different people require different things. So when you get into all of that, it's hard.
It's not always a one size fits all.
Yeah.
But I think there's some practical things that we can look at to take away from here. Like, one, Naomi knew she at least needed to be back in a community of her people that worship her God, and in a culture and place where she knew. And so I imagine just being back in Bethlehem, I think that's where they went back to in the story. Like, that probably just familiar surroundings in a familiar place, with at least in a culture where she knew, and then she brought Ruth with her, and then like schooled her, showed her the ropes. Like, they took steps to alleviate the situation that they had.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know we don't have any food, we don't have any money. Here's how we can get some food.
And
like,
they asked for help.
And they asked for help. They availed themselves to what was around them.
And they were still serving each other in the middle of that.
Yes.
Like, they were still willing to be selfless and lay aside, like, this is not just about me. This is about, this is also about Naomi, who very well could have been, I don't know, she may have been too old to go into the fields and gather food for herself. We don't know the details or she may have been having a harder time keeping her head above water. She had been married a lot longer. She lost her husband and her sons.
Yes.
But clearly, like, Ruth, also a widow, was willing to serve her in ways that were like made sure that they were both taken care of. They were both selfless to each other. Ruth sought out wisdom from Naomi. Naomi sought out practical steps really well, of like, go do this, go talk to him. Like, she knew everything. And she was able to serve Ruth that way. Of here's this new land, here's some go-dos, and Ruth could go and bring back food and help, and eventually a redeemer for their family. And they went outside their comfort zone. I think the biggest thing is that Naomi, who was already a follower of God. I almost said Christ follower, but at the time they were not using that term. like she went back to where she knew she would be surrounded by people who who matched her faith journey.
Yes.
Believed in the thing. She went where she knew she would be taken care of and safe to some level in a better way than Moab. But Ruth was curious about faith.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, what is it about that I can go see? And why was she so willing to embrace Naomi's God? Like, she must have been seeing Naomi in some way worship God in the past, and decided she thinks that's worth bringing into her first step in her hopeless situation. I'm gonna follow too and be curious.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's not a one size fits all, but there's some general themes there that I think it's good to figure out. I don't know, how could you seek wisdom if you're in a hopeless situation? Who could you talk to? How could you go outside of your comfort zone? How could you still remain selfless and serve other people when you have capacity?
Yes.
And don't forget to be curious about how God fits into all of that, because he 100% does.
And usually some part of your getting out of a depressive state, like Brian mentioned somewhere in his message, I don't think it was in that clip, but was it? Or no, it was before. So in the lead up to that clip, he does mention medicine. So like that's all, like that probably, that can be a first step. And sometimes like we need it. I've needed it in the past. Like it's okay. But a part of your step out of it, at least for me, has been focusing on my relationship with God and serving others, and taking the focus off of myself and the situation, not ignoring it. Like, I'm not saying to ignore it or pretend it doesn't exist, because that's not helpful. That's just denial, which will open up an entirely different barrel full of monkeys.
Yep.
So recognizing it for what it is, acknowledging it, but also not staying in it and focusing your attention and yourself outward.
Yeah.
And for me, I was able to do that easier. And whenever I do get into that state, it's easier for me to get out of it whenever I focus on my relationship with God and how I can best serve other people.
Yeah.
And not dwelling on myself.
I've literally gone through phases before where I've gone in, like, I've struggled with big mental health dips, and I've acknowledged it to other people, and then they'll check in on me later and they'll be like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, I started taking my medicine again and been paying attention to God and journaling and loving other people, and it worked, I guess. Like, what the frick? So, and again, never a one size fits all, but I've been in that, like, I've been there, and I'm like, you're telling me what they're telling us to do works. But it does.
Yes.
As annoying as it is, it does.
I think hearing what y'all are saying, and kind of with the context of some of my own experience, I think two things that are super important. One, I already mentioned it towards the beginning of the episode, is just being able to get to a place where you verbalize what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And even more specifically, finding a person or a space where you can do that.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I think part of what makes a hopeless situation feel hopeless is, I don't know what to do. What do I do now?
Yeah.
Where do I go? So finding somebody who can help you start to figure that out and unpack that is super
so
important.
valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Ruth and Naomi becoming each other's battle buddies through it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much easier to deal with something if you have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, or that will at least say, okay, not leave you where you are, but will be willing to either grab you by the arm or the shoulder or whatever and just say, we're going to make this better, and we're going to start by going back to where I know we will have some sort of support.
That's good.
So that's what I really got from that.
I feel like that's a great, I know we didn't talk about practicals a lot, but I think we got a lot of it covered, and that's like a good spot to say, like, this is what's been helpful for us. This is what we're observing from the book that could be helpful. And I would be curious in the future to hear how maybe in some of our different situations that we've faced, we can process looking back and see, when did I do these things and how did it play into the role? And if anybody who's watching feels comfortable sharing the same thing, it would be really interesting.
Yes.
Hearing other people's stories always helps kind of solidify in me the excitement over, I'm not the only one who has to unpack XYZ. Like, it makes me feel supported. So
Well, I think that's one of the things about personal testimonies. The thing that I really get the most out of them, like, it opens up the mind to what other things might be possible other than my own personal lived experience.
Yeah.
Like, as if I hear where God has worked in this situation over here, in this situation over here, in this situation over here, it just says, okay, well, if it was possible for them, then, and God was faithful to those people in those situations, in those times, in those spaces.
Yeah.
He loves me just as much as he loves them.
Yeah.
So it just makes it seem, it makes some situations not feel as helpless or hopeless.
Yeah, that's good. That's true.
Well, this was a good one.
Yeah.
I
I think we covered a lot, like, super fast. But so like, share, subscribe, find us in the Facebook group. Leave us a review. We want those reviews. We'll read them and we'll send you a mug. And we'll see everybody here next week for another episode of the After Chat.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for The After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.